Hi, everyone. I am Camille Miller, and we are here today for our 90-day to goal challenge with holistic attorney Carrie DeJesus out of Princeton, New Jersey, who's going to help us with common legal questions about your business. Thank you, Carrie, for joining us today.
Hi, thank you. My pleasure to be here.
Yeah, Carrie is one of our charter members of the Natural Life Business Partnership, and we asked her to join us today because we are in the middle of we're actually at the end, we're almost to the end of our 90-day to goal challenge, which the members started on October 1st to work towards their business goals towards the last 90 days of the year. And we are having experts join us to do business, different business topics along their journey. So Carrie was thoughtful enough and kind enough to join us for this talk because we were getting a lot of questions about starting your small business, because most of us are small entrepreneurs. So I appreciate your time today, Carrie. Let's first start off with what is a holistic attorney, since you do go with that title.
Yeah, so a holistic attorney is an attorney who practices holistically, meaning that we don't just look at the legal problem in front of us, we take into account the whole person and what's going on in their personal life as well as their professional or business life, and kind of work from a more compassionate, empathetic goal towards peacemaking approach to practicing law. And then I just also happen to focus on working with holistic business people. So it's kind of a twofer for me.
Nice. So we kind of outlined a few areas before we started the recording of what I would say the most common areas. So we're going to kind of go through those first and see what else comes up. Just for those of you that are listening to this, we have legal entity, liability, workers and people that you employ, and marketing. So let's start with legal entity. It's probably one of the biggest questions that I get from this group as well is, how do I start? Can I do business without becoming anything? And what's the difference with an LLC, and how do I create one? So let's start with the different entities, or the best entity maybe. Do I need to be, all right, here's a better question. Do I need to become an entity like an LLC to start my business?
Okay, so first I want to put on my lawyer hat and give a quick disclaimer.
Yes.
I'm giving information and education. I'm not giving specific legal advice because anytime I give quote unquote advice, I'm on the hook, right? For my own liability purposes. So I encourage you to consult your own attorney, right? If you have any personal questions, and if you're in New Jersey, you're more than welcome to pay me money to give you personal advice, but just so that's on the table there, I like to put that that on the table for everybody. But as far as your question as forming a legal entity, I would say, so here's the classic lawyer answer to everything: it depends.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like if I had a magic 8-ball, like that would be the only thing that would come up as my answer, right? Every time I shoot it, would just say it depends. And I think it would depend on, the work that you're doing. If you have, a certain amount of assets that you want to protect, if you are putting the work that you're doing in kind of any line for possibly accruing some kind of liability or damages, that kind of thing. So when I'm working with, say, so in addition to being this attorney, I'm also a yoga teacher. So I do work with a lot of yoga teachers. And so, for example, using them, if they're just teaching if they're only teaching a class a week at a studio, and they have insurance and other protections in place, and they're under the umbrella of the studio, then they may not necessarily need to form a legal entity like an LLC or an S corp or something like that. But I would say anytime that you are kind of out on your own, you're doing you're doing things on your own without being under the umbrella of somebody, or you're doing work that involves bodies, risk of injury is a little bit higher, then I would say yes, that you should be looking for some kind of legal protection. How you form these things, usually for us smaller business folks, the limited liability corporation works fine, or LLC. It provides that layer of protection against liability, but it has beneficial tax. The tax stuff is more beneficial, right? And so that's a little bit out of my realm of expertise. So that would be somewhere where you would call in an accountant and you'd have them evaluate. If you're in a bigger company, say you have employees, you have shareholders, then you're looking something more along the S corp or regular corporation kind of standard. But I don't know if a lot of us are there right now. So to focus on the LLC, it differs by state. So every state has different requirements. Every state has different filing fees. Where I am in New Jersey, it's relatively easy. You just log on, search your state business site. You can log on, you can have an LLC in a half an hour. And you have to keep up with your annual requirements and things like that, but those do again vary by state. And some states it costs more, some states it costs less. It's really where you are.
And if you're doing business in more than one state, because a lot of our healers do distant healing, or they travel, maybe they're doing workshops in more than one state. Do you have to register your LLC in each state?
You can register it in one state, and then it'll cover you wherever you do business. Like a lot of people will register out of state because they'll have more beneficial tax laws and rules and stuff. Like you might have heard, like a lot of people will incorporate their bigger corporations and stuff in like Delaware because they are very friendly to corporations there. As far as registering your business, it would usually be where your residency is or where your main location of your business is.
Got it.
Yeah.
It sounds like from what you described, if you're a practitioner of any sorts, it's always safer to have the protection of an LLC. Does that make general sense?
I mean, to me it does, but
yeah.
I am very risk adverse.
Right. Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
So even I'm thinking like if you're like the first thing that came to my mind was if you're like a massage therapist or in that field and you're going, some people go from house to house to house, you probably want to be insured on top of the fact that you have that body touch thing.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of like, it's like, I always think of it as, and somebody said this to me a few weeks ago and it resonated, what level, how many levels of self-care do you want to have for your business, right? And so, if you have these availability to get these individual professional insurance policies, right? So your massage, your touch, that kind of stuff, I think your base level of protection. And then, because that will help, right? That will help mitigate anything that happens. When we start to form these legal entities, what that allows is it separates your personal assets from your business assets. And so if something should happen, right, you protect the personal assets that you own. And so it makes sense to me, right, that you would do that if you had these assets to protect, which most of us do. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's all these requirements for having these entities, right? And again, they vary by state to make sure that there's a very clear division between our business assets and our personal assets. But I understand in some states, I believe like in California, it's upwards of $500 to register your business. So I can see how it can be a burden to people, especially when we're just starting out, right? We're all kind of like keeping things together. And so you can absolutely just be you and go into business. You would be known as a sole proprietor, but again, there wouldn't be that extra layer of protection. And you could go into business, just start, and then down the line form an entity should things grow. But, there is that risk there. And everything has risks, right? But
Right.
there is an extra layer of risk if you don't have those protections.
How about the level of protection of insurance? So a lot of people have an LLC for that level of protection, but then do they also need to have some type of business insurance that go with that?
So I always say yes,
Okay.
if it's possible. Again, I will admit that I am risk adverse. So, right. I think the insurance, if it's in your industry, is your very basic level of coverage. And that will help. That will help. And so what happens is if somebody gets harmed, receiving your services, and it happens to get to the level where you're going through some kind of mediation or negotiation or arbitration, or you get to the court system,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to weigh factors, right? They're going to say, how much care is this person taking to protect not only their business, but their clients, their students, their whoever that they're working with. And so these different layers. So, even simple things like having people sign waivers, or, getting levels of insurance, the way that you communicate with the people that you're working for and you're serving, having this LLC, right? These are all these different kinds of layers that can be evaluated, right? And to say, it's not impossible for your personal assets to be accessed when you're being sued, right? But to have all these different layers protects you, right? And so if you just have the basic insurance, which is what I would say, at least to start with, there's always holes and gaps in that as well. If your insurance company is not going to cover certain things, if you didn't read your policy and things slipped through, it's nice to have that LLC or some kind of entity to protect you. And, as far as I know, if you're working, if you're like a massage therapist and you're working at, like a bigger company or a chain, they usually require you to have the insurance as well. So there's that.
And as far as insurance go, a lot of our members, not all, but a good portion of them probably work from home. Is there a separate type of insurance? I don't know if this is state or even a question to you, but I thought I'd throw it out there. Is there a separate type of insurance they should have to protect something that happens in their home or their business or their assets that way?
I can tell you what I do. I'm not an expert in insurance, but I have an office, So when I teach yoga, I have my basic yoga liability insurance, right? And I've read the policy, and I know that's important, right? I know that, like, if I teach a hot yoga class, I may not be covered. If I teach an aerial yoga class, I may not be covered. Those are separate things with my insurance. And then for my business, my law office, I have a business policy, so that protects anything that should happen. If there was a fire or a flood or something that should happen, right, I would get, that is just for all of my property and assets that I have that pertain to my business. And I'm actually moving my practice to my home in a few weeks, and my insurance agent was like, okay, well, same level of protection, we'll just change the address. And so that's just, may not be necessary. And if you work from home, it may be covered under your homeowner's policy. You'd have to read the documents and contact your insurance provider. But, I know that's, something that to consider, if you're having, clients come to your home, and you don't have the business insurance, there may be a possibility that they, if they get injured on your property, that the insurance, that your homeowner's insurance wouldn't cover them. That would be something that would be an individual thing. I think you'd have to be looking at your policy, talking to your insurance company.
Yeah, and not that you're necessarily an expert on this, but I will just put out there, there's also a thing called principal insurance. For someone like myself that has this organization, if something would have happened to me, the whole organization or company could fold. we hope that wouldn't happen. But if you're the focal point of an organization and other people are depending on you, when you carry principal insurance, if something happens to you, it can pay out all of your loss or pay out all of your debt or pay out like membership in this case. There's a loss of principal that if something happens to the principal of your company. So if you're, if your company goes on without you or can't, you might want to look around that insurance. So thank you for that. Yeah. So we spoke a little bit about liability. You mentioned having a need for a waiver personally. Can you talk a little bit about waivers, what they might look like? Should everyone that practices have a waiver for a client, or if you work under someone else, what are the rules around that?
Yeah, so my thinking around that is if you're in any way kind of working with bodies, or you're giving some kind of therapeutic something, healing modality, I would always recommend that you create a waiver to have your students, your clients, who you're serving sign. And we've probably, if you've gone to any kind of fitness doctor, any kind of energetic kind of healing, you've probably signed one. At least I hope you would for the business.
Yeah, that's good to know. Yeah.
So, and it's that, I am here on my own accord. I swear, that I am in good physical, mental, psychological health to be able to receive these services. I know my limits. I've consulted with a doctor. There's kind of that standard language around that. And so what that does is it's that extra little bit of self-care to say, should something happen, you have this document to say, well, this person that I'm serving, they told me that they were okay to receive these services. And there's this, idea in the law that if something should happen where we wind up getting sued, or someone wants to sue us, that, we can assign kind of like a spectrum of, I don't even like this term, it makes me feel gross, but like the spectrum of fault, right? To say who's at fault when someone gets hurt. It's not always 100%, usually not always 100%, one person's fault or the other person's fault. So if something should happen, you have this document. It's almost like a promise by the person that you're working with, that they are willing to receive your services and that they're healthy enough to receive them.
This brings up a whole load of questions in my mind. I'm thinking how many people are probably watching this, if not with us on replay, or listening to it in their car right now going, oops, I'm an energy healer, or I'm some type of healer, or I just opened up my practice and it never even occurred to them. They may not even be an LLC. And they're out there doing healing work. Even if it's distance healing and they're not touching anyone or meeting with anyone. But it sounds like everyone should have some type of waiver.
And it's interesting, right? Because the laws are not, like the work that I'm assuming most of the members, right, are doing are probably like way beyond what the law is ready for.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And
so,
but
I don't think that like any type of legislation is considering distance energy healing waivers right now, right? That's probably not on anybody's radar in the government or the legal system. And so my thing is like, it doesn't hurt, right? It doesn't hurt to have somebody sign it and to put them on notice that, you guys are in this together, and they have the right to say no, they have the right to set the limits, and so do you. And I think what I hear is sometimes people are a little, the business owners are a little skittish about presenting this, right? However, I feel so much better when somebody asks me, maybe it's my perspective, right? But I feel so much better when somebody asks me to sign a waiver, because then I know that they're serious about the work that they're doing, and that they're, it's this extra layer of professionalism in my mind. That's how I feel about that.
I could say I agree, because now that I'm thinking of it more and more, it's also by having someone sign a waiver, it's kind of agreeing on a belief system of what the service is or is not, right? Because energy healing could be so many different modalities, so many, everyone in our group comes from it at such a different way.
And that's something you could put in there. Like, I'm not a doctor, right? I'm not going to cure you. I'm not here to save you, right? This is something that we're in together, and, we each have our limits.
Yeah. Well, I have spoke with other people about what can happen with energy healing in so many different levels, or even workshops that people do, that, someone can have a breakthrough, their subconscious lets go, and all of a sudden memories come back, depending on what type of healing you're in. And is that facilitator really equipped to handle this? Then what happens if they open up this Pandora's box of emotions? I was actually reading something, I think yesterday. It was on Facebook. I follow a lot of groups to see what's going on and how people are talking. It was a holistic healers group. And someone talked about, my daughter blew out her third eye and is going into psychosis. What do we do now? And I'm reading going, oh, goodness. And it happened during a meditation session. And I'm sitting there like, well, when she went to the emergency room, like, how did that conversation go? So different things like that. And I'm like, okay, well, how during meditation, how did they know how to facilitate that? So I would think that there could be a lot of waivers, now that I'm thinking about it, that are really important. So here brings my next question. A lot of times people are not working with qualified attorneys to build these contracts, these waivers, to do all of this stuff for them. And they swipe something from someone else's website, or if everyone's selling the exact same product, they hand it to all their reps, have them sign this. What are your thoughts about, what has to be in a waiver? I don't even know how to ask this question. What should be in a waiver? Swiping it off to somebody else?
I mean, I've come across some, like, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Natural Healing Alliance. I'm not a member, but I've talked to other members, and they say that they provide forms if you become a member. And so that may be a good place for our members to start.
Yeah.
Because it's it's a similar organization, maybe we should put some on our website on the NLBP website.
Yeah, well, now I'm thinking liability, but possibly.
I always think, welcome to my brain. What's the worst that could happen? I must ask myself that question like 10 times a day.
Right.
Right. So there are these places that will sell kind of form waivers, and then you can tailor them to your needs. You can hire someone like me or somebody who's familiar. There are a lot of lawyers out there who are really getting into this kind of more mindful, holistic way of practicing law. And as far as your original question of like swiping them from other places, I mean, it's done. It's totally done. And, a lot of us lawyers do that too, right? We'll start with a basic template or a basic outline and then build it out from there. My concern with kind of like stealing or using other people's stuff is that it's almost like a whisper down the lane situation, right? Can you track it to like the original document? Who created that original document? Was it somebody familiar with the law? Was it somebody familiar with the law in your state? So there could be all these missing pieces that you may not realize are missing. And then if something should happen, it's not a reliable document for you. And then there's also this idea of copyright infringement, right? If you steal something from someone else's website and it's something that they created and they owned, well, then you're kind of violating copyright laws as well. So while I will admit that it's done. Probably, I hear it all the time. Like, I just reviewed a lease for a client and she's like, well, I got it from somebody else. And I was like, well, okay, right? But there are all these kind of holes, you know,
Right.
like someone had used the lease for someone and then they gave it to her. So I would say that if you have an existing waiver, or if you've, you know, kind of passed it along because it is, you know, it's another cost, right? I get it. That maybe you should have somebody in your state who's familiar with the law, just look it over and make sure it's okay.
Yeah, and it sounds like whatever document you have, you'd want it for the state that your business is registered in. Is that correct? So it would still
Yeah,
cover you if you were working on someone in a different state.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, this gets into the weeds a little bit, but, you know, there's things like, if, you know, do you have like a basic agreement or contract when you start working with your clients, right? The people that you're serving, like how do you start a relationship with your clients? And if it's just kind of like, okay, I'm going to come in and give you a massage, and there's no I think understanding of the relationship in writing, then it gets a little murky too, because in a contract or an agreement, right, starting off this relationship, you would put in there what state law control, what state's laws control the relationship, right? So if you're based in Pennsylvania and you're giving sessions to people all over the country, if there's no clear delineation about which state law rules, like where are we going to handle these issues? Like which state, what's what we call the venue. And you know, that could be so burdensome, you having to travel to like North Dakota or something, right, to defend yourself.
Crazy. Okay. So what about,
So when I give these talks in person, I always bring chocolate.
oh my
like
goodness.
people's nervous systems.
Wow, there's so much, and we're only halfway through the list here. So if someone is claiming they got injured in my space, what are my rights and responsibilities? So if someone's coming to my office.
Yeah, and so that's why these like protections are so important, right?
Yeah.
Because this is like an offensive, and I don't even, you know, not that we're going to battle, right? But this offensive stance, right? Okay, so I have my agreement, so everybody knows what the rules are. I have my waiver, so everybody knows who's responsible for what. I have my insurance, and then maybe I have my legal entity. So these are all these kind of layers of protection, right? So that if somebody does wind up getting injured or hurt under your care, you have all of these things in place already. But if it does wind up happening, you know, my first line, right, after all of that is to just talk to the person. Using kind of like compassionate conversation, right? And as business people, this is part of our customer service, right? I mean, think of it as more of an extreme version of having a complaint, you know, against your services. And, you know, really listening and hearing somebody out can go a long way. And, you know, being careful to assess risk and being careful to, you know, at the same time being able to take responsibility for any thoughts that you may have had, but also realizing that, you know, part of being a business owner and being in your own power is to know, you know, when someone else is wrong and when they should have taken a little bit more responsibility for their actions. So I think, you know, if somebody winds up getting hurt under your care, I think the very first thing would be to try and communicate with them, see what their needs are, see what they need. You know, this stuff can also be written in their basic kind of contract or agreement. You know, how are we going to handle this? Right? We can lay all of that out from the get-go. And the goal is, it's always the goal to stay out of court. That's always the goal. So maybe there's an opportunity for a mediation. Oftentimes in our contracts, we put these arbitration clauses in which, you know, we have a third party make a decision. Yeah, and it's just kind of it's always going to be a risk, I think. You know, everything carries risk. But I always would say try and lead with that compassion first, but compassion for yourself as well, right?
Yeah. So we did get a question from one of our members, and it's kind of appropriate to put now, so I'm going to bring it up. If there's no license available, we have a lot of practitioners that there's no license, right? We're just doing healing or readings. It could be so many things. Then there is no state law really governing the services. So do you still do that? I kind of like the belief statement idea, you know, and saying, you know, I'm not a doctor, I'm a healer, but it could be anything. I'm just thinking, even if you went for like an angel card reading or, you know, a crystal healer or something that's a little more out of the ordinary, that there would be no rules or regulations around, like different than a massage or something like that.
Yeah, and so I get this question a lot from like Reiki practitioners and you know our energetic healers, right? Because here in New Jersey, we don't have any regulations on that, right? We have very clear standards for massage therapy and you know, manipulating muscular skeletal structures, right? And so yeah, I think it's like a little bit of a wild, wild west at this point. And like I said, like our laws are, you know, these kind of archaic structures that are not ready for this yet. And so some of it is kind of teaching ourselves and teaching other people how we want to, you know, hold ourselves up. You know, if there's a governing kind of alliance or a website that, you know, somebody would find helpful, I think that's a great place to start. But, you know that now you're kind of on your own for setting up these systems and these structures. So yeah, I think I would agree with you that like a really nicely drafted waiver, a really nice drafted, you know, agreement to enter into relationship is a good place to start. Maybe even, you know, some places do their own code of conduct or their own standards of care.
Yeah.
So, and they, you know, would, you know, have that, and they say, this is how I'm going to operate. I'm going to uphold my integrity by, you know, being in line with these values. And that's maybe another way to approach it.
Yeah, I like that idea.
We're kind of in like the pioneering part of this right now.
Right, and that's okay, but we'll see how it all plays out and we'll get better at it, because we do have a member that's a cuddler, and I know that she has an agreement that, you know, says, you know, it's strictly platonic, this is the code of conduct that happens, that kind of thing. There's a whole screening process. They meet outside of the office first, that kind of an idea. So yeah. That's interesting. All right, we will go to the next kind of subtopic under workers, because this is probably one of the biggest questions and discussions that go along all of this. Same with me, I had the same questions. Between the difference between an independent contractor and an employee, and does it really matter? Pros and cons of each.
Yeah, so if you're kind of on your own, right? If you're on your own and maybe you're working for different places, right? You know, you're going to be either a business owner, a sole proprietor, you know, or an independent contractor, right? And a lot of this has to do around with protections and liabilities, tax consequences, or how you would handle your taxes, filing your taxes, keeping track of stuff. Again, I don't want to keep using the same example, but because it's the world I'm familiar with, this is a big topic in the yoga world right now. A lot of studios have been employing teachers as independent contractors. They've been paying them as such and been treating them as such. And so what's been happening in some yoga studios around the country is that the IRS is getting a little mad at them for doing that, and studios are getting audited, and some of them are facing pretty heavy fines and penalties for misclassifying the yoga teachers. A lot of government entities have the opinion that they should be employees of yoga studios rather than independent contractors. And so the difference is really not necessarily the work that you're doing, but how you're required to do the work. And there's tests tests, right? So the IRS has a test, the Department of Labor has a test, each state has tests, which usually align somewhere along the line with federal guidelines. And these are things you can Google and look up. But if you're working for somebody else, I think it's important to know which side you fall on. And often that will be, when you're starting to work for somebody, there will be that agreement, right? That employment or that independent contractor agreement. And
Right.
I'll carefully lay that out. If you're on the other side of it, where you have people working for you, you should be really careful as how you classify them. I know a lot of businesses would prefer to have independent contractors because it's just more cost effective. You don't have to pay for their benefits and all of that. However, if you misclassify, right, and the IRS or the tax division finds out about it, you could be in some trouble. And so I always say, look at the federal guidelines for some, like a general idea, and then go to your state guidelines and then see which one it aligns, or make sure that you align to one or the other, and then move in that direction.
Yeah, I didn't realize there were state guidelines. I knew there was federal. I didn't realize there was state as well.
And they recently shifted where I am about 2 or 3 years ago. They've changed the guidelines, and they're a lot stricter now towards businesses because, right, you think, the revenue, the government would prefer that you be an employee because they tend to get more money. So.
Which is why everyone else wants to be a contractor.
Right.
But I know with the insurance laws that came in, a lot of people moved to contractors instead of employees.
Yeah, and there's this independent contractor gig economy, a lot of us little guys, that's the world we live in, right? Like I've taken care of, I've been doing deductions for years on my own, right? And I know to keep receipts and I know to do all of that, but there's been some changes in federal side too. There was that when that tax law passed last year, that Federal Tax Act passed, it really shook up the independent contractor world. So it's important to kind of be aware of these rules and regulations.
And what was that law?
The Tax Act of 2017. When they did all those big cuts and gave big business all of those, I'm trying to be politically correct here. They gave all the big businesses tax cuts and, reinvigorating the idea of trickle down economics and that kind of stuff. But part of it was there was a lot of confusion around what deductions could be taken out federally. They had changed some of those rules.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify which one you were talking about, because I had the same conversation with our accountant, about what you can do, what you can take, what you used to be able to take. And I know they're kind of coming down on some of the things that people are running through their businesses. I think one of them was mileage.
Yeah.
Let it go through, but then they were stopping mileage from going through and stopping trips from going through and stopping restaurants from going through. And so, people have to look that up. Another one on that same idea, I don't know what you know about this, but I just knew it from my nonprofit background. The difference between volunteers and internships. A lot of businesses try to find free internships, but they're looking at it as just like free work and not realizing that there's an entire education component to it to actually be classified as an internship. So.
Yeah, and so I would just say again, like lay all that out and agreement.
Yeah. So I just wanted to also say, look at your state laws. It's not free people working for you for free. So that's a good one. All right, let's get into marketing. I know that you always go back to the yoga studio, and that's great. We're talking about using image, video for marketing. Is that okay?
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts on that. So, and it goes back to this idea of theft, right? So I would be careful about using images that are not yours, using images that are not licensed to you. If someone, if you're taking other people's images from like websites or places and you don't have permission or you haven't bought the rights to it, please be careful, right? You'll probably maybe get a cease and desist letter, and then, if they're really grumpy, maybe something more, right?
Right.
And this idea of, so I've had, people come to me saying that, kind of the flip side of it, that businesses have used their images, like say in like a class or a healing session, they've used their photos or their videos without their permission in their marketing material. And so if you're a business owner, and social media is how we get so many of our clients now, right? And so and we know that if we use images or video, that people are more willing to click on our stuff and read our things, and that's the whole thing. And so, I love marketing, and I get all of that, but I would caution you to perhaps, seek permission from your clients or your students to use their image. Or, if you're straying into the more medical side of it, right, we have that whole HIPAA laws that we have to think about. So the anonymity and the ability to protect your clients, your patients, or whatever you want to call them, right? That's a whole nother thing. And I would say, if you want to, like, right, I'm assuming that most of the people in our group are working hard to work with integrity, mm-hmm. right? And to have these businesses that are heart-centered, or however you want to put it. So I think that also extends to how we market. So if you're going to want to use some of your clients or your students or whoever's images, maybe that goes in the waiver. Maybe that goes into some agreement that you have when you start your relationship. I've been on the other side of some organizations and companies that, have this wellness facing forward, but behind the scenes, they have some very, in my mind, questionable business practices. And it's really off-putting to students to be in class, or even, teachers or presenters or instructors who unknowingly sign away their rights, right? Oftentimes, sometimes, right, if you're working for a company and you say make a training video, that company will automatically own the video, and then you're not allowed to use it for your own personal use. I mean, that you deal with videos all the time. And so that's just always something I want people to be aware. I always want everybody to read everything before they sign it. And if they don't understand it, have somebody help them read the policies, read your documents, because, this wellness, holistic, health-centered, it's a multi-billion-dollar business industry right now, right? Yeah, and so right. We can all come from this, from this heart-centered place wanting to heal the world, but there's wolves out there, right? Yeah, there's wolves among us, so let's not pretend they don't exist.
Exactly. So consent to photograph is a big one, especially for minors. If anyone's working with minors out there, the consent to photograph is really big. We do the same thing when you sign up, because our members can join us on any of these videos or the podcasts. It says when you register that these will be taped. And I say before we start the camera, if you talk, you will be on camera. Mm-hmm. So we get consent that way. It's in the registration, we get consent that way. But as we make more and more of them, we have to become more and more aware of it. I belong to a health place that I have come out in their marketing brochures, like in a class or in a thing, and I was a little bit shocked.
Yeah, like I would have worn a different outfit.
Oh my goodness!
I would have put some makeup on.
Yeah, and I probably would have consented to it, but it's better to know when someone's sitting there photographing your class. It doesn't mean that everyone would have consented to the photograph, and it's happened a number of times.
Yeah, and I think it feels a little icky. It does to me, at least, feel a little icky. you know, and
It's a
then,
little
you know, as
weird.
soon as you get that icky feeling, that's like a breach of trust. And then,
Yeah.
you know, you have to work even harder to get that back.
Yeah,
You know?
totally agreed. Totally good, agreed. I'm trying to think what else. So does anyone that's listening to the podcast have any other questions or different areas that you want to make sure that we get in before we end our call with Carrie? Carrie, we've gone through almost everything that I can think of. You have answered so many questions for us. I'm sure there'll be a lot more after this releases you can do.
I mean, the way I look at it is, you know, it's I'm all about, you know, building foundation and systems and structures, right? And I think the work that, you know, our members are doing is so integral to elevating, you know, collective and individual consciousness and building a better world, and, you know, however you want to put it, evolving us, moving us toward, you know, all these big things, right?
Yeah.
And so to have these kind of safe containers for this really important work is really something that I'm passionate about talking about. So, you know, I'd say, like, think foundational things, think systems and structures, think documents, think, you know, think of this as self-care for your business, right? You're taking care of your business.
Yeah, terrific advice. And it's all about our mission to raise the bar of professionalism within our industry, that we have to follow laws and do what we're supposed to do, even though the guidelines haven't really caught up to all that we are. We have to work within the framework that we do have. And I would almost say protect ourselves more, because it is misunderstood of everything.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people, but some people feel kind of icky about it. You know, I've had people push back on me and say, like, can't we just like hug and handshake? And I'm like, you absolutely can, right? But also, we also still live in this world, you know, and it's pretty litigious. So it's a personal choice for sure. You know, but like I said, this is, you know, a business, if you're doing it the way that, you know, in that business sense. So.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for all the time and all the information that you gave us today. You really gave us a lot of to think about. I'm sure a lot of people are listening to this.
Eat some chocolate. Everything's gonna be fine.
Yeah. I'm sure it's overwhelming for some, and I always say, just take baby steps. Just look, you know, go in one direction to protect yourself in the new year. And that'll be good. And I'm sure a lot of things go up. But if you're, you know, if your business is running away from you and you're doing all the stuff, that's a good thing. You might as well just protect it as best you can, so you can continue to go in that direction. I thank you for your time today. We are coming up on almost an hour, so I definitely want to let you go to your afternoon. And I'm just going to end the conversation and say thank you so much for being a part of our challenge, our expert side of our challenge, and giving us this great information about businesses. And we will hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.